Relax.com, mdriverelax.com, 50% off. If you're stressing out, take it in the evenings, chills you out, anxiety a little bit, mdriverelax.com, 50% off. Well, there's some NFL stuff going on right now. We talked about the Dak Prescott story. It's fascinating because Dak Prescott, we see all the numbers, and it's massive. It is Russell Wilson level. There's a story about a $45 million payment at the end. Let's get Albert Breer via the Coward Global Satellite Network to join us. All right. What's not being talked about, Albert, with Dak Prescott's deal?
Well, clearly, Colin, they're going to have to find a middle ground. And the raw numbers are a factor, of course. The fact that Patrick Mahomes could do a deal between now and the start of training camp's a factor as well. One reason why the Cowboys would be motivated to get something done sooner rather than later. I think that middle ground, though, actually could be found in the length of the deal. The Cowboys have typically tried to get their players to do longer-term deals. They've locked up Zeke Elliott that way. They've locked up Zach Martin that way. They've locked up Jalen Smith that way. I think one place where they could find a middle ground, maybe they go to Dak Prescott and say, we're willing to do a shorter deal with you, maybe a 3-year deal, a 4-year deal that's a little bit of a Band-Aid that gets him where he needs to be from a monetary standpoint, and then he can revisit in 3 or 4 years, come back to the table and benefit by some of the things that are going to be happening in the league, i.e. the television deals and gambling money coming in.
Story comes out yesterday. Taysom Hill, according to Jay Glazer, is going to start. And I said this earlier. He doesn't really fit all the parameters, but 5 years ago, if you'd have told me we'd stop going to movie theaters or we'd jump in strangers' cars, it's called Uber. I mean, who knows the way the world changes? I look at him and I think to myself, Lamar Jackson, I didn't know if he could play as the MVP of the league. What do you make of the Taysom Hill as the next Drew Brees story?
I don't know if he's the next Drew Brees, but I certainly think Sean Payton is intrigued by what he can do with Taysom Hill, and they want to give him more opportunity this year. And really, this is about throwing as many darts at the dartboard as you possibly can and getting ahead of Drew Brees' retirement. And right now, in that locker room, they've got two guys they're throwing darts with. One is Taysom Hill. The other is Jameis Winston, who may have had an up and down 5 years in Tampa, but he was the number 1 overall pick. There is some talent there. And so, I think the idea on what the New Orleans Saints are doing right now is they're taking multiple shots at finding Drew Brees' successor. Taysom Hill has a lead right now because he's been in the building the last couple of years. He knows Sean Payton's offense, and he's actually gotten on the field for Sean Payton. But Jameis Winston's going to have a shot at being the guy, too. And so these two guys are going to be interesting over the course of the next few months as they get a shot to compete in training camp to be Drew Brees' backup. And then we get to, opening day, and we see who's number 2 on the depth chart. Important to remember here, Colin, that wasn't Taysom Hill last year. It was actually Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah. Speaking of replacements, I was just saying this, is that 20 years ago, Bobby Knight was Bill Belichick. He was the coach of record in America. And then he fell in love with his system and thought his system was more important than players, would not do the one and done, and he disappeared. Greg Popovich was the star of the NBA coaches. And then he decided, you know what, I don't need Kawhi Leonard. My system's bigger. And now they're less relevant than the Utah Jazz and Denver Nuggets. Belichick has a system, and I know it's formidable, but he wanted Brady back. Jared Stidham was not impressive enough in a year. Garoppolo was. Belichick would have moved off Brady for Garoppolo. I keep hearing all this Jared Stidham stuff, and I'm like, if he's so great, why did Bill want Brady back? I mean, what do we know about Stidham?
Well, I will tell you he wanted Brady back because he got an aging roster, and Brady better matches the roster that they have right now. But I would also say that bringing in Jared Stidham was really a bet on the coaching they've got in the building. They've been doing this for a few years, Colin, in drafting quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo was part of this. A kid named Danny Etling 2 years ago was a part of this, and Jared Stidham is as well. They look at guys who are kind of distressed assets coming into the NFL. And if you look at Jared Stidham's history, it's there for you. He was the number 1 high school quarterback in America coming out, started as a true freshman at Baylor. Things went haywire there. He transfers to Auburn after spending a little time at junior college. The Auburn offense was still the Cam Newton offense, not a great fit for him. So what the Patriots saw when they drafted him was a player who had a ton of talent, who came into college as one of the most highly recruited quarterbacks in the country, and just things went sideways when he got there. And so they feel like they can still harvest the talent with Jared Stidham. They spoke really highly of him last summer over the course of July and August. That cooled off a little during the season as he worked in being the scout team quarterback. But they see Jarrett Stidham as one of these kids that's sort of a distressed asset. There's talent there, and having him as a starter is a bet on their ability to coach him up.
When's the last nugget of news you got in the last day with the NFL? Anything new out there?
Yeah, I mean, over the last 45 minutes or so, the agenda for the May 28th league meeting went out. And to me, the most interesting part of it, there's this booth umpire proposal that was put forward by the Ravens and the Chargers. There was a lot of skepticism over whether or not it would actually make it to the league meeting for a vote. Well, that is on the agenda. And they called it a booth umpire. What it really is the sky judge.
Yeah.
And this is what so many coaches in the NFL want, Colin. When I ran a poll on this. I texted all 32 head coaches last year, got word back from 26 of them. Over 20 of them were in favor of a sky judge. They want this mechanism in place that would sort of provide the officiating crew with the benefit of all the HD angles, all the instant stuff that we have at home. They want to give the officials that benefit, and so they want to put somebody up in the booth who's going to have the benefit of the television broadcast, so they can use that as a tool to better officiate the game. Makes all the sense in the world. I know there are a lot of head coaches hoping that this sky judge proposal, booth umpire proposal, goes through next week.
By the way, Alden Smith to the Cowboys. I roll my eyes at it. Greg Hardy, Randy Gregory, Alden Smith. I don't think the Cowboys are particularly deft at the defensive side of the ball. I don't love their coaches. I think they're hit and miss on drafting it. I think they're very good on the offensive side of the ball. They built an unbelievable best offensive line in 20 years in the league. They don't miss. They got Dak in the 4th round. Alden Smith, to me, is an eye roll. I just don't think he's going to have a huge impact. What do people say in the league?
Well, here's what I would tell you, first of all, Colin. You're right to look at that one position, the edge rusher position. It's a position where you've got to spend a lot of money. They've got DeMarcus Lawrence there, who, again, he was one of these guys. He had red flags coming out of Boise State. They wound up hitting on him. They paid him. That's a position where you either have to bring in a guy who's got red flags and roll the dice, or draft him high or pay him. And so they've found ways to try to cut corners at that position. They struck out on Randy Gregory. They hit on DeMarcus Lawrence. They struck out on Greg Hardy. And now the hope is that they hit on Alden Smith. By all accounts, Alden Smith's really turned his life around, but we've seen in the past how these things can be up and down a little bit. So certainly a risk by the Cowboys, and a risk that they've taken at that specific edge rush position.
Good stuff, Albert. Nice talking to you.
You too, Colin.
So we got some NFL news. By the way, we're apart these days. Geico wants to bring us together. It's called the 15% Geico Give Back. Car policies, motorcycle policies. Current and new customers last the full policy term. You'll get 15% back. Geico.com/giveback for info and eligibility.